Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our session. Hopefully you've also got the chat going. We have Julia hiding in the background, trying to give us a little bit of sanity. So please ask questions and she will let us know what you're asking whilst we figure out what's going on with licensing and have a little bit of banter. But yeah, are you ready, Chris?
Ready, more ready than I've ever been, actually. I'm just like super nervous of going off mute in case I've got any weird stuff open. But yeah, hopefully
I think we're safe. We would have heard it.
Okay, I hope so. Alrighty.
Right. Let's go, right. God, now I need to, there we go. Right, so before we do anything, because the only reason we are literally here is these guys. So we have to say thank you. And Chris, which ones do you want to pick? Who do you want to pick?
I just want all of them. But okay, I'll take the top. You can take the bottom. So in the most professional retail voice I've got, a massive thanks to ScriptRunner, DQ Global, and Proximo 3, sponsors of the Scottish Summit 2021.
Yeah. And Rollout, Redspire, Agilisis, and Hitachi Solutions, who have enabled us to be here today.
We would suck at adverts, dude. Like I'm just saying, really.
But anyway, so you're probably wondering what on earth is going on. So let's just try and figure that out. So my name is Kaila Bloomfield. I'm a technical architect in the sort of Microsoft ERP back office and Azure space. Follow me on Twitter for stuff that you won't find important but quite amusing. On LinkedIn, that stuff that's quite important but not so amusing. Chris.
Right, so I'm the Global Power Apps lead at Avanade, and I work in the Power Platform Center of Excellence. And follow me for inappropriate content on Twitter and more appropriate content on LinkedIn.
Right, so formalities over. What are we doing and why are you here? Licensing is a nightmare. We all know licensing is a nightmare. And for me and Chris, it's become a little bit of the bane of our life. So we're doing this session to hopefully try and give you a little bit of clarity on how licensing can work when it comes to Microsoft and their back office suite, ultimately. We're going to talk about what's going on with Microsoft first and why we're even in this situation. Then we're going to go on to ultimately licensing for the Power Platform between the ERP. What can you do? What can't you do? And then talk about, well, what implications do other types of licenses have, like M365, because they do. And this is why it's such a nightmare to figure out. So first off, Chris, do you want to talk about your front office solutions?
My front office waffly poffly stuff. Yeah, okay. So I guess the whole idea around this concept is that many moons ago, when they released Dynamics CRM or customer relationship management, it was all well and good. It was considered like a bunch of consolidated modules in one sort of big giant stack or burger, as we call it. And that was epic. So we had sales, service, and marketing. And then as Microsoft grew the product stack, they came up with this concept of applications. And they kind of split those out within D365. So you had this concept of customer service, which was rolled up with loads of functionality within the core platform stack. Same with sales, where they focused on things like orders and invoicing, et cetera, et cetera. Things like marketing, where they built out a module from scratch. I'm hesitant to say they copied Click Dimensions, but maybe not. It all depends on how many people I want to upset today. And then they applied Field 1, which then essentially became Field Service. And this was all built on what we previously knew as XRM, or any kind of relationship management. And then they changed it to Common Data Service. Now it's something like Common Data Open Flexi Service XRM Verse or something. I mean, whatever. I think it's like Dataverse, right? We're going to just sit on that one. Okay. Yeah. And Dataverse is effectively the layer underneath all of this that provides the core, or the kind of digital bricks that make up the first party application layer. Now, that's all good and well. It's underpinned by Azure. So all of the technology under there is kind of Azure is the cogs that make it work. And then it's overpinned by M365. So you're kind of living within your M365 tenant. You've got this wrapped up in security and all of that. So that's all cool. And, that all recently became, well, not recently, has become known as Dynamics 365 since 2015. Right. Kaila, do you want to take the next bit?
Well, I was going to say, this is the point. So at no point of any of that did you mention anything about the back office stuff?
Nope, I didn't.
No. Whereas when we used to work on back office, we literally, as you can see, we did our finance, our supply chain, our retail. Sometimes we threw some Azure because our application's less cloud native, shall we say, and its infrastructure never really worked with CDS. It just didn't. Nobody really even thought or considered of using it because it didn't work. Had some, some real nice Power BI, Microsoft 365. And when it came to customer engagement, you sort of didn't want a project that included it because it'd always be a bit of a nightmare. There was like this whole war and battle between the two worlds where CE tended to do better in how many projects they sold, but the actual value of the project sold in ERP used to be higher. So it was like a big old war, it was like between the two worlds, and nobody liked each other. And the joint proposition from Microsoft never worked because of that. It just did two different platforms totally. It just didn't work. And ERP was obviously better.
Well, can I tell you? So I actually, when I was working at the previous partner, not Microsoft, but the one before then, there was a dude that used to call Dynamics CRM, Dynamics for Simpletons. I was like, dude,
I'm not going to comment on that because that's literally.
Oh, here we go. No,
not going to comment.
Just because you think you've got a more complex underpinning layer doesn't mean ours is like any less complex. It's just we expose more and make it more visual, right? And that's through Dataverse. So I'm just saying, it's still the same bricks. We just have a layer that makes it more palatable, right? So I actually like this slide because this is like, for me, okay, so for somebody that, well, let's not say, not for us, right? Because we know there's a definitive line between what's in Dynamics. But for a customer, they look at the Microsoft website and they're like, oh, sweet. Finance must be a Dataverse. Well, they don't even think of that. They're like, cool, this is D365. Cool. Must be built in the same tech, right?
Well, this looks like the perfect sales proposition. And this is why Microsoft have done it. This looks beautiful. It looks like it all works. It's all, one platform, all easy, simple, quick, and it can facilitate any area of a business unit. But it's not, right? This is not, it looks like this. They license it like this. They tell you this is what it is, and it's not.
No, it's not. And that's actually, so now you're getting onto technical stuff rather than commercial, right? Because commercially, this is what it looks like. And it's still even licensed differently technically. So like, that's the thing that I always struggle with, is that now, in my opinion, licensing is moving over to a technical discussions rather than a commercial discussion. So I know full well, as somebody that's vaguely technical, that stack, this diagram or this representation is not a true technical representation of what's under the hood.
And the thing is, actually, within businesses, this is the biggest change. When you're now doing pre-sales, when you're now talking to customers about licensing costs, you cannot do that without ultimately a technical person who is getting involved in licensing, and to be honest, has to live and breathe a little bit of it. They release a licensing guide almost every month at the moment, doing slight adjustments, which actually can have quite a significant residual impact. The architecture that you design in your solutions, especially because there are so many different ways to do anything, between Azure, between the Power Platform, or just, actually customizing or configuring the apps, you need to understand how you're going to do that literally at pre-sales when you don't even have enough information. This is the thing, right? But it needs to be technical. You can't just do a finger in the air guesstimation anymore, because your licensing is across all three platforms, and you have to understand how you're going to solutionize your gaps and your ultimate solution for your customer to an acceptable level.
Yep. And so here's the point, right? I think that, you're right. So point number one is to understand the technicalities of licensing. You do need to understand the digital bricks that make up the platform, and each brick costs something different, right? Fair? Yeah. I think the other thing here is that we think that as technical people, a lot of the time, like we will build a solution based on the tech we understand. So what I've found is that I watched the finance and operations person hammer case management into an ERP system, which is cool, Like, you can do that to an extent, but that's not what it's built for. I've also seen transversely somebody try to have a financial management into a CRM system, and that didn't look too hot, if I'm quite honest, and it wasn't scalable. So yeah, you've got to use the technology for the right thing and license it correctly.
And you have to understand where Microsoft are going with this, because that future view will end up being where they technically are. They're just not there now. So what we're going to try and do is try and help you navigate this hybrid era we are in at the moment to help the customers get the most out of their licenses. Because I guarantee you there are so many customers that are paying too much at the moment.
Dude, loads. I can tell you right now, there are hundreds of customers right now that are using Dynamics 365 first-party applications, when I can tell you that most of what they need could be covered by a Power Platform solution licensed at like $10 per user instead of $62.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So let's start off with the basics on what really can be integrated in a finance SKU. And there's some really key niche bits here that everyone gets caught up on, right? If you talk about Dynamics 365 and Dataverse, Common Data Service, Power Platform, whatever name it has next week, it literally, your access does not exist unless you have dual rights switched on to that environment within the Power Platform Admin Center. It doesn't. Literally, I'm telling you now, if you're not using dual right, it doesn't exist. It's literally that simple. It's that black and white. It's clear in the licensing guide. Don't try and tell Microsoft you want otherwise. It doesn't work. If you're not going to link it to your customer engagement CDS instance because you've got data issues that you're worried about and you don't want to combine them, then you're setting yourself up for a really big headache at some point, and it's better to take the pain sooner rather than later. You know, we have heard now, it's official, everyone knew it was coming. Lifecycle Services is being shut down when it comes from environment management, and all of this is being moved into Power Platform Admin Center. The reason for this is to stop this confusion over what is constituting a finance and operations license when it comes to the Power Platform. You know, we're having one module for Dynamics 365. Like we said, technically it's going to all come over at some point. As a full user though, literally you do have full access in the sense that you can build and you can access custom model-driven apps, Canvas apps, Power Automate, Common Data Service. Portals are slightly different because ultimately they're a different type of license when it comes to it. So Chris will pick that up in a bit. But we do need to just be clear that for a full user, you know what, you can have a field day and it's great, and you can use the data, you can use even the connector to finance instead of using the Common Data Service if for some reason you wanted to. But activity and team member is really, really different. And literally, it was only the other day I started hearing about this. It's within the context of the app, right? So literally, it has to be something that is embedded in the finance and operations solution. So you can do that with configuration now, although with model-driven apps, it's more complicated because it's just like a website, and you can put them in the dashboards. But as an activity or team member user, you literally do not have access to any of this unless you're accessing it through a dashboard in the finance solution. So when it comes to, you know, if you want mobile functionality, you want to work with it isolation, finance and operations, we have crap mobile functionality. It's only using the mobile apps. You can build a custom one or the standard one. But when I say mobile apps, I'm not talking about the Power Platform. I'm talking about a legacy platform that was built a few years ago when they were still isolated platforms. That will eventually resolve itself one day, but that's only ultimately going to resolve itself when Microsoft upset you all and they move all the team member functionality into a model-driven app that's hosted natively on the Power Platform anyway. So careful what you wish for, because when that functionality does come to activity and team member users, you're going to have to move them all. But there you go. Sorry, my next slide. My slide button is just not working today.
I can sing.
You can sing. And this is just a highlight, literally what I just said. Data integrator. Everyone says, oh, they prefer the data integrator. It's more stable than dual write at the moment. Dual write's new. Do you know what? Then you're switching off a whole heap of functionality. That's it. If you're using the data integrator, if your customers are using data integrator, if you're using custom OData feeds, if you're using recurring data jobs into a CDS environment, it's not covered. You have no access. You will need Power Platform specific licenses, and that's it. There's literally no conversation. It's just it, black and white. So I'm actually going to hand this one over a little bit to Christopher, because Chris had to educate me even a bit, because this is a very, CE concept rather than something new to us. So restricted entities, Christopher. This is definitely all.
Okay, so this is a favorite point of contention of mine, because first of all, I'm going to say it right now. Dynamics 365 customer engagement first party apps are Power Apps, right? So let's get that out there. They're Power Apps. That's what they are. So sales is a Power App. It's a model driven app. Now you're probably thinking, awesome, Chris, you suck by saying that. Like, what does all my dynamic skills mean? Well, I just want to tell you something. Basically, the way that this is framed is that if you can rebuild a first-party app using Power Platform, do it. Go ahead. Except what I can tell you is that you will be spending many years trying to rebuild pieces of IP that have taken Microsoft a long time to create. So if you think you've got it in you to rebuild the schedule board in field service, okay, give it a crack. If you want to try and rebuild the marketing campaign management D365 for marketing and the customer journey functionality, go ahead, do it. You'll be spending a lot of time and money. So that's why the first-party apps exist. Now, one of the things that's really key is that underlying in each first-party app, there is a data model or a structure, okay, the foundation that provides the ability to have that first-party app layer. And inside of that, you have a bunch of what we used to call entities, now have been flagged as tables. I do just want to say something to make sure that everyone on the call feels the love. Tables are entities, entities are tables in our world, okay? The terminology, in my opinion, isn't correct. I agree, Kaila, it's not right, because an entity could be a collection of tables, but it is what it is. So yeah, you got to suck it up and carry on, right? So
welcome to this non-technical world we're gifting people. We have to accept stuff like this.
So, now here's the part that's going to blow your mind. Do you know that you can build model-driven apps and Canvas apps on top of the Dynamics 365 entities without paying a Dynamics 365 license? So I can build an application, my own model-driven app on top of the opportunity entity without paying for a sales license. Okay. So now we're starting to think about things a little differently. Here's the next thing. When Microsoft decided to do this, they came out with this concept of restricted entities. Entities that you weren't allowed to build model-driven apps and Canvas apps on top of without paying for a license. So one of those restricted entities, to an extent, is case or incidents inside the customer service SKU. Now, what that means is I can't build a Canvas app on top of the case entity without having a customer service license. Fine, you guys are going, okay, well, this is a bit crazy. How do we deal with this? Well, it's pretty simple. Restricted entities probably won't impact you very much, if I'm honest. And everyone freaks out. Everyone's like, oh my God, restricted entities are going to pay all the money and lots of licensing, but that's nonsense. Don't even worry about it. So Kay and I went through the list, right? And if you go to Bing and Bing whatever, or Google whatever, use Ask Jeeves or whatever the kids are using these days, and I'm going to look for Dynamics 365 restricted entities, go through the list. Opportunity is not in there, okay? Multiple ones aren't in there. The only two that really stuck out for us were the ones in field service. And that was product inventory and inventory journal. Now, that's where it gets a little bit more sticky from a dual right perspective. And Kay will take that shortly on. But just remember, okay, with restricted entities, that is just a data structure. It's not business logic. There is an element, all right, of some business logic in the form of things like plugins and that, but that's not necessarily business logic. That just contains rules and events. Just think about the concepts of the entity being a data structure and your app being the logic that lives on top of it. Okay, so Kay, do you want to take the dual right one?
Yeah, so ultimately, taking all of that and breaking all of that down, what we've just talked about and why restricted entities exist and in what in Microsoft's minds they're protecting ultimately their own applications, their revenue. If you then switch on a restricted entity to be migrated between finance and field service. So if we take product inventory, for example, which we thought, maybe people would want to do, any user that had access to functionality that uses that data in supply chain or field service will need access. You need to be licensed for both applications. Doesn't matter if you physically use finance, because it's a restricted entity. So as soon as you put that dual right on, it's classing you as having ultimately access to both systems. So you need to be licensed for both. And that can really mess some people up, because obviously on the CE side, your licenses are much cheaper actually than ours. And you have to pay for the most expensive one as the core license. And then you have to have the attached license separately to that. So you could have a field service user. And how much are they per month, Chris?
Oh, I can't even remember. It's like $65 or something.
It's like 60, $65. Whereas we're like 140, I think, or something like that. So it's literally really, it can really mess you up. So just keep an eye on it. Generally speaking, it's fine. And I do know the product group are looking at end-to-end processes now, because there were a couple of customers that got really messed up by this. And they're saying, we want you to use dual right to link up these two systems. And if you're doing a standard end-to-end process, when we're talking about having sales and having finance and doing that end-to-end, if you just have a sales clerk in the CE, they shouldn't need access to finance. And Microsoft are breaking down those end-to-end processes and looking at these entities to find if there's these problems that do exist, because ultimately they want you to set this up and they want you to get dual right running, because it's where they're taking it. But just really be careful on this transitional period. Look out for these restricted entities now. That's the only one that they're in the licensing guide pulling out. So you need to just be clear. Can impact, especially, it did seem to be field service was the big hitter. The rest didn't seem to really have anything that stands out. So now we have someone's favorite topic.
So yeah, this is like the bane of my existence, actually. So when I was working at Microsoft in the partner world, I literally got a multiplexing email every day of my life. It was the best thing in the world. Okay, so essentially, Kaila, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to a music festival?
Yeah.
Okay, you've been to a concert as well, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So I want to tell you something that I did in South Africa. My wife was on the call, right? So I'm going to be judged quite heavily for this. Okay. So one of my mates in South Africa, we went to a place called Opikopi, and what I did was he couldn't get in, right? So he didn't pay his like 230 Rand or whatever it was, which equates to like £1 in the UK. So he didn't pay his entry fee. So what I did was I took my bangle off and I passed it to him through the fence, right? And then he went up to the front. He got in, gave me back my bangle. And it was even worse. Like there was a VIP bar there, right? So we did the same thing. We just shared the bangle over the fence. He got into the bar and we were just smashing free drinks the whole night, which was pretty cool. It was pretty kick-ass. I'm not going to tell you what happened after that, but it involved the hospital. Anyway, so have you ever done that before?
No.
Yeah, you're a better person than I am. I'm a bad human right now. I want to tell you, multiplexing is kind of similar to that in some way, shape, or form. And you're probably going, where the hell is he going with this? But do you just want to pop into the next slide real quick?
Yeah.
Right. So when you look at the Microsoft definition of multiplexing, it means multiplexing refers to the use of hardware or software that a customer uses to pull connections, reroute information, or reduce the number of users that directly access or use Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, Dynamics 365. Multiplexing does not reduce the number of SLs of any type of access to Power Apps, blah, 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 blah. Okay. When I translate that, okay, rule number one is that you cannot try and avoid buying a license for accessing information or data. Okay. That's really, really important. So think about it as like that bangle, right? So I got my mate into the music festival for free, and then he smashed all the free drinks at the bar with me. Now, think of me just doing that as one person. Imagine 500 people doing that. Okay. Now think about this. That festival made a loss on the gate. Okay. And then they also made a loss at the bar, which means that they had to charge more for the tickets the year after and more at the bar the year after to make up their costs. Now, that's what multiplexing is in our world. Don't be a dick, right? Just read the licensing guide. Okay. Follow the rules and it'll be cool. Because remember, to keep the lights on at Microsoft, we have to pay, right? And I mean, yes, you're going, oh, Chris, that's probably an over-exaggeration. But Microsoft Azure's biggest customer globally is business applications, right? Under everything you see is biz apps, so we have to pay to keep the lights on. So just pay for the license. Avoiding paying for the license, right? You know what it is? It's kind of like that time at the bar when everyone just buys me all the free drinks. It's just not cool, right? Microsoft do audits, and I didn't say do, it's do audits, okay? And they do check. Now, as an example of multiplexing, the example I'll give you is that I once did some work in a bank. Weirdly enough, I know that was kind of odd for everyone. And what they did was they said, hey man, we're going to buy one Microsoft Dynamics 365 SKU, okay, license for sales. And then we're going to take ADX Studio, which is now Portals, and we're going to overlay that with our really kick-ass functionality and give it all to the bank users for free. So they paid one license. That's multiplexing. It's not cool, right? Anyone accessing information directly from the D365 customer engagement platform, finance and operations platform, et cetera, needs to pay for a license. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And actually, this is really interesting as a concept for the next slide, right? Because finance and operations, everyone's like, oh, it's so expensive. The licenses are so expensive, especially now we're doing comparisons to the customer engagement side, right? Because our licenses are so expensive. But this is sort of why. I guarantee almost all of you have never heard of Orderline licensing before. I know people who have been in the industry 20 years that have never heard of Orderline licensing, right? The point of Orderline licensing is to avoid multiplexing. This was before the Power Platform. This is before anything. And it basically accepts that we're a financial processing system. We're going to have interfaces that are creating transactions within our system, not business users. So Microsoft is very aware, just by looking at user numbers, they won't be able to necessarily estimate the infrastructure they need to sit behind that application. The Orderline licensing SKU is to sort that issue out. So it means for these big customers that have chunky interfaces that are creating your invoices, creating your sales, all of these entities you're seeing on the right-hand side, if you're creating them for an interface, guess what? You should have brought an Orderline licensing SKU. And I guarantee you didn't, because I don't think I've ever seen these actually sold. And then they should be, because if as a whole, customers start using this SKU to pay and estimate their licensing properly, overall license costs will go down, because we then are getting more revenue to pay for that infrastructure that we need to manage customers' environments. So then we suddenly don't think hosting them is so expensive. And that's literally how it works. You have to tilt that balance and you have to figure that out. And there's no, Microsoft is starting to say they're putting technical, concepts and limitations in place where they're looking at this. But the last time we looked into it, actually, there was no technical, audit that did this. If you moan for performance and they've paid for 40 full user licenses and you're creating 10,000 transactions, then they're going to have a look and say, look, you've messed up. You need to buy this SKU. Then we'll increase the size of your box. That's, all of everything, even your go live checklist, is to try and figure out customers who need to buy this SKU, because that's going to change the sizing of your infrastructure, which you have to pay for. If you don't pay for it in Orderline licensing SKU, everyone pays for it in the licensing costs. Does that make sense, Chris?
Absolutely, 100%. And you're right. It's a scale, right? It's going to teeter all the time. If we all just do what we need to do and pay our bills, then it's awesome, because it's going to be good for all of us. But the outlying stuff it's just really difficult to try and get people to understand. And you're right, hard enforcement. The moment hard enforcement comes in, truly, it's going to be a wake-up.
But the thing is, it's going to come soon, because once we move, let's be honest, the roadmap is everything from the FinOps platform is ultimately going to move onto the Power Platform. Microsoft have been secretly adjusting and changing the back-end architecture of finance to start aligning it to more cloud-native, scalable infrastructure, which will end up at some point, if Charles Lamanna gets his way, on the Common Data Service natively.
Damn right. Yeah. You're spot on.
And when that happens, The technical enforcement is going to go from near 0 to 100%, because all of the CE guys, all their API limits, they cry about it daily.
Why would you bring that up? Literally, why would you bring that? That's like.
But we have to talk about API limits because this is a thing. This is what's coming.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that it's probably one of the best things Microsoft have done, and I know I'm going to get bullets for this, but
this is for multiplexing. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's talking about the same thing. Don't use too much of, don't take all the food. You go to a party, don't eat all the food. Other people need to eat too.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on that, and I know I don't want to steal all the time, but like on the API limit thing, I remember asking Charles, I said to him, him and Ryan, I was like, dude, so are you telling me in the Power Platform using the app license, I can make like a God mode app with one Power App license? And they're like, okay, yeah, man, but I mean, it's going to suck because you'll hit your API limits in 4 seconds. So again, it's trying to enforce utilization, the correct utilization of the platform, not breaking the rules. Like, I mean, sure, you can try and do that, but I always say, like, just respect what the platform does and you'll get the best use out of it.
Yeah. So this one is definitely you.
All right, man. I'm gonna tell you
all through.
Hey, I'll just build it. So this is the question I probably got asked the most when I was at Microsoft, and it was around portals licensing. Okay. It's really difficult because it kind of is consumption based and it's kind of not, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the weird part. I feel like it's a bit of a hybrid between the two. So first of all, just to let you know, portals, Microsoft Portals, all right, is based on Dataverse. Your metadata layer is inside Dataverse. You cannot have a portal without having Dataverse. Box number one. Box number two, okay? If you want to use another solution like Wix Website Builder or WordPress or whatever, there are ways to do it, right? But you're going to have to talk to Microsoft about licensing. I'm going to break somebody's heart now, all right? In the licensing guide, if you build out external connectors with portals, okay, I'm telling you now, there are essentially 3 mechanisms to pay for, ways to pay, right? Now, the next slide later on it's probably going to break your hearts, but we'll get there. So the first one is anonymous users. So you basically pay for page counts, which is fine. Most websites work like that. No worries. It's basically action-based. So you have 1 million users, fine. Okay. The next thing is that when you're looking at authenticated visitors, those are external people. Okay. Now, I'm going to qualify the word external very shortly. There are external people based on the number of logins over X amount period, right? So it's over a 24-hour period. Now, if you have 4,000 people logging onto your website, it's going to cost you a big, shiny bucket loads of money, okay? So what I would do is check out the licensing guide, check the costs. I can't remember them off the top of my head, and then negotiate. That's point number one. And I'm probably going to get into huge trouble for saying that at some point. But it's just key for you to know that authenticated users are users that log in. The security structure in portals is managed within portals, okay? You log in, that's a user that has a named user license or named user login within the Dataverse, right? The next one is employees. It doesn't matter if they are a contractor, okay, or if they are employees internal to your organization, they have to have a license to access Dataverse in whatever way, shape, or form. Now, let me qualify that. If you have customer service and you're accessing customer service information, all right, you need to have a Dynamics 365 license. Uh-oh. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. If you're accessing non-restricted entities, all right, through the portal, you can use a Power Apps license from a premium perspective, so either user or app, right? But you still need a named user license to do that. And I'm sorry to say it, but that's just the way it is. Kate, you just want to go into the next slide? Mm-hmm. A pretty little diagram that tells you exactly what's included. So external users are customers and suppliers, those types, right? So people that are not necessarily under the domain of your organization or somebody that supplies you. Now, internal, this is where the argument comes in. Employees are a natural, yes, you need to have a license. Agents and contractors. If you have a field service company with contractors that are filling in your portal that put information in and take information out, a portal license won't cut the mustard. They need to be licensed either with per app, per user, or a Dynamics license. End of discussion. It was not clear up until this point that was the case. It is now clear. And Kate, do you want to explain the actual functionality as to why this has happened, or do you want me to take it?
So that from our world, the biggest impact this has is customer and supplier portals have been moved onto Power App portals. So if you are in finance, if you're in sales, your customer portals now and your supplier portals have moved into a Power Platform portal. So you have to understand how this licensing structure works. And the most basic way I can explain the segregation that Microsoft are going to look at here is if you've created this customer in your tenant, so if you've created them an account, they're then classed as an internal user.
Spot on.
That's literally it. If you've got B2B or B2C, then you can probably class them as external, depending on the level of access you've given them when you've done that point. But if you literally have created them an account in your tenant, they're an internal user, you're going to have to pay for them. That's it.
Yeah. And it can get pretty pricey, because if you think about this, the cascading value of how much a portal's license would cost, they're saying it's what, like $200 for, let me just check. It's about $200 for 100 daily logins. That's external users, logged in users. So start thinking about like B2C, 5,000 users logging in. You got to do the math. And if they're contractors, if you've got a huge workforce of people accessing that functionality, you're going to pay. So yeah, and there are rules, there are multiplexing rules that we're not going to get into on this. But what I'm going to tell you is just be smart about how you use portals.
Yeah. Right. So we are getting close. I'm keeping an eye on our time. We're talking too much. So
yeah, sorry.
Microsoft 365, what impact is this going to have on how you do your licensing? Actually, quite a lot. So let me build this out.
It's a huge amount. And in fact, you know what? I'll tell you right now, most customers in Power Platform are M365 users, not D365 users. Yeah. And I'm probably going to break some people's hearts on this call again. But when we have like a M365 user, okay, I'm going to tell you this right off the bat. Microsoft 365, access to standard connectors, not premium. So when we're talking about standard connectors, they are personal productivity or team productivity. They are not business productivity engines. Standard connectors. If you want to access business productivity, you got to pay the money, right? And that's where you're going to be accessing things like Dataverse, Salesforce, Oracle, SQL, yes, and loads of others, right? So just please remember, standard connectivity, right? That'll be your personal team productivity. Business connectivity is premium, okay? And you do need to pay licenses for that. And it's like that in any other vendor you go to, okay? And you can check it out. I'm happy to do like battle cards on Mendix, OutSystems, that it is exactly the same way, right? So please understand. And I kind of feel like when you start looking at this, that doesn't mean bastardize the way that you build apps. So that doesn't mean use 85 SharePoint lists as a relational data structure and build a Canvas app on top of them, because that's a dumb idea and it's going to break, right? So rather just pay the license, use the proper connectivity, and build out the right solutions. And let me tell you, if you're a customer on the call, you're going to give your money to one or two people. You're either giving your money to Microsoft to have the proper licensing structure, or you're giving your money to the partner to bastardize something that may not work later on, right? So just do the right thing and build the right solutions on top of the right frameworks, and you'll be fine, right? Okay, do you agree?
I do agree, but there's also another part to this. We need to start thinking about the combination of access you have as a user. And this is the thing. So to access any of your ERP, you need to have an Office license anyway, because your account needs to be in Azure Active Directory. So every customer that we have, if you're, say, a team member in Dynamics, you also are going to have an E3 or an E5 license. That E3 and E5 license does have access to functionality outside of the business application. You need to start using both, because a team member can have access to all data across Dynamics 365, but only through any area that they've got, physical access for that system. So you can come up with really unique ideas that are not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Use and maximize the benefit you're seeing from your access that you have as a user. And everyone focuses so much on what you're not allowed to do per app or per sort of, solution independently. And you're not thinking, look at this wider world that I now have. Look at this wider functionality that I now have as a business user. If you are an Office 365 user, you can do some really elaborate and creative things to automate and improve and transform your business functions. And I'm not saying to you, okay, that means I'm, avoiding using Dynamics 365. I'm just saying, actually, just use the functionality you're provided within your licenses, maximize your investment. Just don't do something that is wrong. If it feels wrong, it is wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I just feel as if it's like seeing the strawberry cupcake on the table. It's not yours, but if you take it and it feels icky, like just don't do it because it's not right. Like using 85 related SharePoint lists and building an app on top of it, it's going to break, right? And okay, I think you're right. Like look at the positive and what you can do. However, it is so important that you realize the limitations of the technology for certain scenarios. And actually, this goes into the session Martin and I are doing just now on what you can build and what type of data structures. Sorry, I'm doing a shameless plug, but
So, but just to bring it back to licensing, Chris has done something really cool. Really cool.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, so we're basically coming to the end, but like this is one of the type of journeys that we were looking at doing around how to select the right tools and the right licensing. And I'm going to say something very naughty. Did you know you can get a free Azure subscription and still get access to Power Platform and Power Apps, right? If you just type in make.powerapps.com. Bad, Chris. I'm leaving it at that, right? But this is the type of thing we're looking at. If you want to know more, we're happy to build these things out again. So Kay and I will probably do one for FinOps at a later point. But yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, and it's trying to make it a little bit more intuitive. In this transitional phase we're in at the moment, it's really, really hard. Licensing's hard. We get it. And that's why Chris and I keep doing talks like this, trying to walk people through, trying to support people. Because especially when it comes to back office ERP, we are in a halfway house. Whereas if you have a customer engagement Dynamics license, you don't have the technical restrictions that we have, where it is still a separate platform. There's a lot of frustration at the moment by people saying, well, you sold it to us, the Dynamics 365, all integrated, and it doesn't. Why can't we do this? Why isn't it there? Why is that information? Why is that data not flowing? Why is it not available? Microsoft is still investing in it. There's massive announcements coming out in April. There's some that have just come out about the investment in dual write, getting it up and running, getting it working. You need to make the most of where we are at each stage and then just keep an eye on it, because ultimately, like we said, there is not going to be two platforms in the future, but moving all of that across in a way that disrupts all of their customer base the least is real hard. And so we just all have to make the most of the situation while it's there and try and, support them in how to most intuitively do this. It's going to be long, and the customers need to feel like they're getting all of those sexy bits from the platform. They do have access to the Power Platform. It is there. Dual write is definitely becoming, something that's amazing in its own right now. It's taken years of investment to get it there. But there is still so much hesitation for people to use it. And the people that get their customers on board, they start using this, they start showing them how amazing it is. Those partners, those customers are going to be the strategic customers of the future, because they've already got on board. They've already got their center of excellence in place. They've already got their data flowing. They've got the center of excellence, building the way for people like Samit, we heard in the keynote earlier, to transform these businesses and these organizations. That's literally what's to gain. And that's where we sort of need to go. But in a way, we're just mindful of the licensing.
Yeah. So I guess just one last thing, never see licensing as an inhibitor, see it as an enabler. And actually there's a lot you can do, right?
Right. So, oh God, we've got lots of questions coming in. I'm just looking now. So have you been keeping an eye?
We'll probably have to jump into the chat once this is done. So thank you everyone.